My question is, what is the difference between mind and no mind? uh, isn't the glass in front of me a creation of the mind? That's a good question. When I was a child, I learned what a glass is, and I learned to separate that object from the rest of the objects in the experience field. Yes. All the objects in front of me are standing through concepts that my mind learned at some point. I feel that my psychology is creating all of this reality. I don't understand what is the difference between my ego mind and reality itself. Thank you very much. Beautiful, wonderful question. Let me address it. So here's what's happening. So when you were a child, it's not like, so a big misconception about enlightenment is that the enlightened state is a state where you cannot like separate objects any longer. This actually isn't true. If you couldn't separate objects at all, then you wouldn't be able to function at all. You see? So if you can kind of navigate an obstacle, then you can separate objects. It's okay. But what tends to happen is that this unified field of awareness, when the insight is relatively fresh, when it's relatively immature, is so profound in its acceptance and its unity that there's a talk of no objects at all, only awareness and things like that. The only way that you can experience only awareness and no contents of awareness is in deep sleep, is in conscious sleep, or in a long meditation that gets you to the same place. It's like if you just experience nothingness, absolutely nothing but nothingness, just pure awareness. That's not the case in life. You don't live life this way. It's not possible to actually live life this way. If there's some behavior, then there's some objects. So what happens in childhood, as you mentioned, is something else. So what happens is that in childhood, we begin to dream, and we begin to pay more and more attention to the language. So we get lost in language. So we were told that this is called a glass. This by itself is absolutely benign. Okay, what is a glass? Well, a glass is just a sound that you make to communicate to someone that you're talking about this object that looks like this, right? But then we were also told a lot of many things. We were also told a lot of lies. And when we are taught concepts of good and bad, which aren't true, authentic good and bad, but what society wants us, what society perceives as good, what society perceives as bad, we get conditioned, we get punished. We're being molded into a specific shape, into what society wants us to see. And all of this is done with two instruments. And one is violence or threats of violence, or withdrawal of love, neglect, basically. And another is language, because language is used to explain to you why these things are done to you. And as a consequence, the mind becomes very attached to language, and it does create, as you mentioned correctly, it does create a lot of concepts. A lot of them aren't related to physical reality at all. Like, for example, again, the good and bad, the social constructs. And because all of this reality, it's not actually reality, but it's mind constructed reality, because all this mind constructed reality is actually non-existent. It only exists in the mind. There's a constant rumination about it. There's a lot of language activity. So it is abstract. It is supported and it is connected to our suffering. It is connected to the suppression, of which there already exists a lot at this stage, because you have to be quite suppressed in order to begin losing yourself in the mind-created reality. So they are connected in this way. But it is also on the level of logic, of the level of the brain, of the level of the mind. It is also highly abstract and symbolic, and so there's a lot of rumination. There's a lot of activity happening because the mind tries to figure it out. So you can actually even talk about the incessant activity of the mind in a dream state, the constant thinking about the past, the future, yourself, other people, or anything like the nature of the world. You can even talk about it as the mind's confused, continuous, incessant attempt to figure out what's wrong with this reality. Because there is something wrong with this reality. It's not actually reality. We get lost in our minds. And so this extends to physical objects as well, actually. So it's quite possible and it happens a lot, actually. It happens to me too in meditation or in psychedelic trips to see a lot of rumination. Like, is this a glass? Is this not a glass? So trying to figure out the completely obvious and immediate reality in front of you. It's a misdirection in some way because what you really try to figure out is yourself and your inner psyche and your inner suffering. But whilst you are in the reality of mind, uh, the the mental objects appear extraordinarily real, right? So it's not so let's say that there is a simple reality of vision. Uh, so you see a glass, you know that it's a glass, and that's actually a completely enlightened state. So when I look at the glass, I know that it's a glass, right? But there's no narrative in my mind about it. Uh, there's no thinking like, oh, it's a glass. You see, the mind is completely silent. But if I'm asked, what is it? I will say it's a glass. You see, so I know what it is. The brain is a very extraordinary potent classification machine. So that's how we survive. That's behavior. We classify things. So I know that it looks like a glass, and I know that there is a label because I'm also I can speak. There's a label, so I can call it a glass, but there's nothing that is needed when I look at the glass on the level of thought, on the level of the voice in my head that I would need to hear to know it, right? Uh, so. So there's vision and there's all of this functionality as the kind of natural state of the human mind, and then on top of that, in the dream state, there's a world of there's a conceptual world which appears real because the ego lives in the conceptual world, and in this world, descriptions, concepts, words, ideas are primary, and so the mind tends to ruminate in this world, and the destruction of this world is the spiritual process. And so there can be a lot of rumination about objects and what they're called and are they real, are they not real. Objects are real, concepts about them are just concepts, are just descriptions, nothing else. And the depths of this world is actually not the how we call simple things in the objective reality. The true depths of this world is our suffering, is our ideas of morality, right and bad, judgments, fear, the relationship to authority, uh, comparisons to other people. Those are the true depths of this world. That's why in meditation and in psychedelic trips, we experience fear, we experience hellish realms, we experience forgiveness as well. We see our suffering, we see other people suffering. But on some level, the certain amount of rumination about philosophical existential questions is also possible. That's actually how the mind sort of collapses into the deeper exploration of this world, is by questioning everything. You know, how do I know that my reality is real? If you're actually living in reality, then this question is absurd. Like, for example, my mind would not give a second to the thought, well, how do I know this reality is real? It's just an absurd thought to me. I just know it is, you know. It's the only thing that makes my reality not real is the physical death. But in the reality of the mind, a simple question, you know, how do I know this reality is real, can launch a deep rumination, because there is something to it, because the reality of the mind in which the ego exists, which the ego inhabits, is not real. So those questions are kind of deeply threatening to this reality, and the rumination is a manifestation of that. So so when you say that I feel that my psychology is creating all this reality, that's exactly right. Your psychology, so the psychology is built on top of suppressed emotionality, suppressed energy, and as a coping mechanism to other people's cruelty and abuse. And so the psychology builds this mind and builds this reality, and it extends to physical objects too. Like, for example, there could be uh, in meditation, or again on psychedelic trips, you can have experience where objects in front of you like dissolve or change form or become cartoonish like and things like that. And I've had experiences like that. Those are actually hallucinatory experiences. I don't experience anything like that right now, even on very large doses of psychedelics. Those are hallucinatory experiences. Those are because basically what you actually see in the dream state is that you see reality, and then as on an overlay on this reality, there is mind's dreaming, and which is of the same nature as the night dreaming. And of course, during the daytime, it takes much more to distort the senses, to distort the actual reality with dreaming than during night. But it happens nevertheless, right? So if you take if you're in the dream state, and I've had those experiences too, and you take a large amount of psychedelics, you may start seeing reality around you very, very differently. And the same thing happens to people with schizophrenia, for example. People can experience persistent hallucinations and other things. So what it is the mind's dreaming overlaid on top of the actual reality. During night, everyone experiences that. That's what night dreams are, right? But during night, there is no sense reality, and so the mind is very free to create. During the daytime, there is sense reality, so the mind is not as free to create. All the mind can do is to distort. But it happens. So it happens to people. It's not very uncommon, and so there's an enormous power in the mind to create reality for itself. It's extraordinary. It doesn't only pertain to words and concepts, but it's absolutely capable of distorting vision, distorting hearing, distorting all the senses, and actually even create sensory experiences out of nowhere. At least on the level of vision, hearing, maybe not so much on the level of the body, but on the level of vision and hearing and some other senses. We all know that because that's exactly what happens at night dreams, during night dreams. So yes, so this reality is predicated and built upon psychology. You're right. When you say I don't understand what is the difference between ego mind and the reality itself, that's a very kind of natural, confused state when you are plunged into this reality of mind. Well, when you know that this is where you live, but you haven't yet destroyed it, so to speak. It's the same as being awakened in the dream versus out of the dream. So it's an acknowledgement that you're dreaming. It's like lucid dreaming. Oh, everything here is mind created. Well, not everything. There are some things that you cannot destroy. I like this saying very much. You know, one person said, I don't remember who, reality is that which does not disappear once you stop believing in it. So you can stop believing all of your psychology. You can stop believing all of your thoughts and all of your emotions, but the glass will still be in front of you. So that's the base reality, the base reality of the senses, undistorted by the mind. So when you ask in the beginning of the question, what is the difference between mind and no mind? So it's somewhat kind of semantically tricky, because sometimes when I refer to the mind, I just refer to the human brain. But more precisely, when I say the mind, I mean the capacity of the human brain to imagine something that doesn't exist in reality and believe it. So when I say the mind, I usually mean the dreaming mind. And so you can say all is mind on many levels, right? You can say that that the egoic reality is the dream of mind, is that all in mind. But you can also say that even the base reality, the reality from which there is no escape other than death, which is the reality of the senses, we both see the sky, is also mind created, in the way that you not actually see how things are, but you see your perceptions of things. You don't actually look, you're not actually seeing how the tree actually is, because another animal would have a very different picture of the tree. But you can say that you're looking into your brain, you're looking into your own perception of the tree. So from that perspective, you can also say all is mind, and that would be true. You can say everything that you can experience is your mind, and that would be true. But there is a base reality which cannot be transcended before death, the physical death. And then there is the psychological reality. There is a mind reality that isn't reality at all. That is mind's imagination and its distortions and its lenses and its filters. And that can be transcended. And so if I use the mind to refer to the dreaming mind, then the state of no mind, or the state of enlightenment, it does not mean that the brain doesn't operate. So then what's left, we would call the brain. So then I say sometimes that the mind is the creation of the brain. You see, you cannot transcend your brain, or you can only transcend delusion. You can only transcend the dreams. But if we use the word mind to encapsulate everything, right? Like if we say there is no difference between mind and brain, and mind is just this, then obviously everything is mind, and you cannot transcend mind. But then you can purify the mind, so you can remove the parts of mind which aren't real by surrendering to the experience, not by rejecting the experience, but by surrendering the experience to the experience. You can transcend and abandon the illusions and delusions of the mind, to end up in the base reality, of the undistorted, pure sensory experience, which includes thought, rational thought, not the incessant self-referential thought, which is trying to figure out what's wrong with this reality. So there's much less of it, because much less of it is needed, but it includes it.